There's the red light. Hello, this is FRANKLYN WEPNER. This is the sixth tape in the series that I'm making about David Schwartz's work. Going back to an original idea of this project, my intention is to combine theory and practice. So we just saw with David's not here right now, you see, just me. He couldn't make it. I would have preferred that he was here today, but it's just before Passover, so he's busy. But anyway, I wanted to do this talk now before I forget his work and before we start something else in a little while. So I'll do the best I can without David here, and I hope I do as well as I could. All right, so this is a theory tape, and if you don't like theory, then you may as well delete me right now. This is going to be very boring. But if you like me and you like both theory and practice, then maybe you'll find it interesting. The main focus is going to be, first of all, David's work, but second of all, relating it to Nachman of Breslav's, in particular, one of Nachman of Breslav's essays in Likutei Moharan, which means his collected essays. No, essay number 3. That's the one where he talks about the difference between a true singer and a false singer, or a good singer or a true singer or an evil singer. That's the usual translation that you'll find of the word negina in the Breslav Research Institute, the usual book. This one here that most people that study Nachman of Breslav, Likutei Moharan, Banglit in English use this because it has the Hebrew on one side of the page and the English on the other side of the page. So I need that crutch. Okay, so I'm looking at essay number 3 here. And in front of me, this is going to be a difficult thing, a long thing. It might take an hour, it might take 2 hours, I don't know. I have a plan to do this, and this is really, by the way, you should realize that this is very unique stuff here. There are a million people doing theater, and a million people doing Torah lectures and philosophy lectures. But I don't know of anybody that's doing what I'm doing right now. The moment-by-moment coordination between the therapy and the theater as the grounding of a process here, and the theory. So it's going to take a little while to get it all out, and I hope you'll have patience. And if you don't have patience, maybe you'll come back to it some other time. But I think it's very important to see these connections. Not so much that this is the whole story, but this is an example of how I think and how I work, and the model, you might say. Unfortunately, we have in the work of David a very beautiful example. So if you haven't seen those 5 videos of his, I hope you'll have a chance to see them. And really, you should see them before you listen to this, because otherwise you'll get the theory, but you won't really get too many of the connections. Okay, but whatever, if you're here, thank you for listening, and here I go. So I have a strategy. I have a list of things I want to cover here. And in this book I have David's writings, and I have the notes from the therapy sessions and the theater sessions. And here I have the original source from Nachman of Breslav. So I want to put these 3 together. I think the best way to organize it, and I thought about it a lot, is to go chronologically. That is to say, start from David before I met him. Unfortunately, David sent me, David Schwartz, sent me a bunch of essays of his, different things he wrote in the past, sounds like past 5 years or so, I don't know exactly, which gives us an idea of how David thinks or thought before I met him. And I want to compare basically a before and after. Now we've only done one basic therapy exercise, We've only done the exercise of awareness. Afterwards we're going to do, he says he wants to continue, I hope he does, we'll do 3 hours on one dream, and then we'll talk about that one, and then we'll do 3 hours on another dream, we'll talk about that one. So it'll be a total hours, 8 hours of well, call it Gestalt techniques. Remember, I stress all the time, I'm not a licensed therapist. I've been doing this for 35 years already now, 37 years, since 1975. So you can decide yourself whether to take me seriously when we get to the therapy stuff. And I'm not a rabbi either. I've been doodling around and trying to understand Nachman and Breslav for quite a while, and you can decide if you can take me seriously about that also. All right, so let's start off with David before I met him. Now, I have a bunch of writings from David, and how do we start? First of all, I boiled about 50 pages of writings down to about 8 pages of notes, but I'm not going to take the time even now to read 8 pages of notes. I'm just going to quickly summarize. I think David, before he got to his current infatuation with Torah, and especially the Asper Yeshiva, he was very much involved in the street culture, and one of his favorite gurus was Bob Marley. And one of the things that he talks about is this song, and I'm going to just read a few of the words from Bob Marley, and because I think you'll see the theme there is a theme that we're going to keep coming back to again and again in different ways, from different perspectives. So here's the thing about three little birds. I'm not going to read the whole song, just a little bit, a few of the words. Rise up this morning, smiling with the rising sun, three little birds, pitched by my doorstep, singing sweet songs of melodies pure and true, saying, and then somebody in the background says, this is the message to you. Singing, don't worry about a thing, cause every little thing gonna be all right. Singing, don't worry about a thing, cause every little thing gonna be all right. Now that's the whole text. The main thing I want to focus there is two things. A, that's the birds, and second, about everything being all right. Okay, let's just remember that as we go along here. And we're going to come back to these birds things, because in section number 3 of Likutei Moharan, Nachman and Breslav also talks about birds in a very different way. And we're going to see the difference, and then we're going to see how the transition from one way of talking about birds to the other way of talking about birds can be very profound. And there we're going to bring in another person that maybe you know about, maybe not, Walter Benjamin. Walter Benjamin wrote a very important essay that deals with this sort of thing. How language changes meanings depending on the same word can mean different things. Now here the word's going to be birds. The word birds, the way Marley uses the birds is one thing. The way David uses the word birds is something else. And the way Nachman and Breslav uses the word birds is a third thing. And you'll see, if you follow the difference, you'll see a transition there, going, you might say, up the scale in terms of spirituality, and that going up the scale, up the ladder, Jacob's ladder, as a matter of fact, is what Walter Benjamin calls translation, in the sense that in the Middle Ages, angels went up and down the ladders, the angels on the lower level and the cherubim on the higher level. Cherub, by the way, is the Hebrew word, comes from the Hebrew word karov, cherubim, which means near. So the cherubim are higher, closer to God, or Hashem. By the way, Hashem means the name, and religious people like to hear not Hashem, they don't like to hear God so much. But I sometimes use one, sometimes the other. Anyway, so the word bird starts off here in a very simple way, the birds twittering, and that's a wonderful day, like zippity-doo-dah and that kind of stuff. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay, wonderful, wonderful feeling, come my way, something like that. Anyway, bluebird on my shoulder, that bird, the same bird, the bluebird on the shoulder is the same one on the window here. That's basically indicating what a wonderful day it's going to be. All right, a good times bird. But when we follow this idea of, from everyday life birds to the deeper sense that Nachman Breslav uses the birds, and in fact Aristotle also find the same idea, then you're going up, going from angels and to Kerovim, higher archangels, you might say. You know, you're getting closer to the word. All right, so that's the basic shape of what I'm trying to do here. All right, so I just realized I forgot to look at the clock. Let's see, I must have used up about 7 minutes. All right, got to be careful that I stop at around 9:15. Okay, all right, so next we're going to go to David, all right? And in David's stuff, we're starting off here, you might say street level, and we're going to see how David, when he was into street life, he already talked about his period of using street drugs, so he was into that, even though he's a lawyer. Before that he got a degree in law, afterwards he got, for somehow or other, he got involved in street life and drugs. And so at that time, he was writing things like this. So let's see here. Should I read for, how much of this should I read? Maybe I'll read a little bit of it just to give you an idea how David was thinking. He was religious, but not exactly the way he is now. He wrote this. In my continual quest for the Messiah, I have discovered more and more about myself and growing spiritually. It goes with the saying, it is not the destination but the journey. During this time, with limited funds and an unsettled feeling both physically and spiritually, with neither a consistent place to sleep and eat, nor a structured environment for rest, I have learned it is a delightful canvas for growth spiritually, as all dependence is from the mighty hand above. So David at this point is apparently very religious. One begins to see the will of God be painted in front of his eyes. The lessons learned is that what the Baal Shem Tov teaches: fear only God, and there is nothing but God, and only does good to his creatures. And then the next thing I have here is he returned to Israel. Thank God I finally returned to the land of the Jewish people, Israel. I finally, unlike the last time I went for myself, I finally felt the sense of calm and tranquility fall over me. I finally got that sense of peace, the state of being. Being in Israel has given me the sense of peace of mind, body, and soul. With a broken-hearted journey to this land of the Jewish three fathers and four mothers, I call it the journey because it was trying. The long, wearisome darkness has lifted, and the light at the end of the tunnel is glowing bright. All right, so we hear the word darkness and light. We have faith. The idea of faith, and we have darkness. These are key words. Then he talks about the sukkah a little bit. He's talking about some people. He says, we spent the week studying Torah, kicking it front row at the Matiyasu concert. Getting a miracle ticket, of course, where I was one of the many to catch Matisyahu do his ceremonial stage dive, dancing, laughing, singing, and most of all, just dwelling, marinating in the sukkah. That's the one I want to catch on. Marinating in the sukkah, bonding together and with others. Oh, and welcoming the unseen but often felt presence of the 7 shepherds. So we have the sukkah is a very important element here. Next thing you know, we find David. I might have erred on the chronology here, but he's talking about his experiences working on some kind of a farm near Hebron, I think, and he's talking about the simple life, a change, near Beersheba, a simple life, a change of environment, he says, away from the academic was much needed, plus the frustration in learning began to mount because of my lack of Hebrew skills. The constant noise of the Gomorrah in the background. So apparently, so what is it that I am doing that is giving me a sense of soul satisfaction? And here's the thing about the birds. Well, it all begins bright and early before sunrise, following the advice of, among others, the late Bob Marley. May God bless his soul. Give praise and thanks to the Lord. Smile with the rising sun, and don't worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be all right. Unfortunately, unlike Bob Marley, may his soul be blessed, for us on the farm, it is not 3 little birds by the doorstep singing sweet songs. It is a bunch of confused roosters, cock-a-doodle-ing, and dogs barking before the sun is even up, etc., etc. That's another thing. So they're the birds, okay? And now he's talking about self-negation. These acts of morning feeding, he's feeding the animals, has taught me about putting others before myself and the importance of self-negation in service to others, and most importantly Hashem, which leads to humility. As I'm learning, is an important quality these days as well as the days of old. Now pray for the peace in Jerusalem. As the late Bob Marley, may his soul be blessed, would say, one love, one heart. Let's pray that we all get there together at the final temple with Messiah and party and feel all right. Peace, love, and truth. Okay, so the idea here is that one love, one heart. It's oneness he's talking about. He seems to be drawn to the idea of oneness. And philosophically that's what would be called identity. And the opposite of identity is difference. And the synthesis of the two would be identity and difference. But here we mostly hear from David about identity. He's somehow longing for oneness. That's another important element here in the story. So he's after some kind of truth here. And here's what he says. All is well with me. I have found that the more one strives to get close to the Maker, the more he is drawn to do his will. Life may seem like a roller coaster at times, up and down, at times up and at times down. However, it seems to me that it is more like a drag race, and this is an important idea. Drag race, straight, fast, and to the point when one focuses on striving for the truth. So here we have this image of the truth out there, this oneness, and going there in a hurry, in a straight line. Okay? Next, he's talking about the Arabs a little bit, because he had neighbors that were Arabs there. Be it Allah or Hashem, the thing is God is, and his name is. And once the world recognizes this, peace will come, may it be now. Again, the idea of oneness with the Arabs also. And then he goes back to Bob Marley. David the King lives forever, singing sweet songs as a lion in Zion. That's the name of a song by Bob Marley. Because I wanted to live the dream of Bob Marley, may he rest in peace, and ride the Zion train and be iron like a lion in Zion, I needed to leave behind my vagabond lifestyle of following the wind, going with my gut and serving others, and get back to my rational and reasonable side of an intellectually grounded being instead of a spiritual floater living in the heavens. So here David is talking about coming back to reason in a certain sense. So we have this opposition between emotions, guts, and reason. And he's talking about then he's talking a lot about the Torah. It pains me to know that all wisdom is in the Torah. Yet this generation seems to be quick to shed the clothes of thinking and head to the beach to surf the net to find answers, and are content with the small waves of wisdom rather than tightening the shoes of logical thinking and heading to the hills, climb the mountain of true knowledge of Torah. So he's looking now, he's going back and forth here. On the one hand, a lot of emotional stuff, on the other hand, intellectual stuff. Oneness again. He's talking about arriving at a synthesis, an acceptance of the fact that one may be a Jew in many different ways, for all paths lead somewhere, provided that Hashem is present at the start. Again, the idea of oneness. And the last major idea here, a couple more things here. The truth about acquiring a teacher is acquiring a friend. The best way to learn is having a friend to change your thinking, your perception, your decisions. The counsel of the wise is to be followed completely. Now here's another element. Following completely a certain teacher. Learning at the feet of the sage, he went on. The challenge, and that's an important idea. He's following completely a certain teacher. Right now, as a matter of fact, for the last 2 years, he's been very close to the Rebbe Mordechai Goldstein and Diaspora Yeshiva, and he's more or less doing what he said. Spending a lot of time working with one person who he finds a source of great inspiration. Okay. And then one other element here, separation. The challenges of separating oneself from negative influences to strive for the greater good. Being silently satisfied and loving life alone with Hashem. This idea of separation, it's another element. Exodus, he talks about exodus from material pressures and restraints of the Western world, and fight for the sake of my soul by heading back to Israel. And there to be surrounded by positive influences that rekindled my faith. And the thought of drugs and depression have been buried in the desert sand, and the stars in the sky and future is brighter. So it is. Now here's another important idea of faith, but a certain idea of faith. So it is with this leap of faith. I repeat, the leap of faith. And this is sounds very much like Nachman of Breslav. And the proper environment, instructions. I feel stronger and stronger each day, so the world will once again be peaceful, and the Messiah will reveal himself, and the final holy temple with Hashem's blessing will be built. And again, as Bob Marley sings, the stone that the builders refuse becomes the next cornerstone. And that's a very important image also. We'll come back to that, the idea of the stone. And here finally, the last section here, he comes back to the idea of isolation again. Man must go completely against his true nature, disconnecting from the material world, thinking outside the box and seeking the good even in bad. The process is a constant battle, a roller coaster ride again of highs and lows, rationality and emotions. There it is, opposites, rationality and emotions. And environments to test your progress. The better the test gives one that ability to apply his learning with interactions with others. Now here's an important idea. At this point, the situation no longer has any effect on him, and he sees. Well, let me go back there. Even better, the tests give one that ability to apply his learning with interactions with others. This in turn allows the ability to be nothing and something at times, everything. At this point, the situation no longer has any effect on him, and he sees the clarity in the future. All right, that's the idea. Somehow, detaching oneself from the situation. Again, he goes on, with indifference to the situation, his outlook, he's talking about himself, with indifference to the situation, one's outlook is that of positivity. Though his expressions may not match, but serene in times of distress, stoic. When the apparent sadness, apparent oppression and hostility, then, word missing here, he can truly say his actions are necessarily good. Okay, so certain elements there. We had, let's see, I have them written up here. So we have mind, rationality versus hard feelings. We have blind faith versus no faith. We have darkness versus light. We have the idea of oneness, one heart, one love, going with a straight line to the truth. Isolation's another element, separating oneself from negative influences. Indifference to the situation, to get to positivity. The leap of blind faith is the stone the builders rejected. And the result is getting to the good. All right. I know I went on a bit there. Maybe I lost some of you along the way. But I told you this is a big thing I'm trying to do here. And for somebody that can appreciate it, I hope it'll be worth the trouble. So the next step is to go on. I introduced David here. He could have read that himself, but that's okay. He's not here, but I read it for him. And now I want to introduce Nachman of Breslav. For those of you who don't know Likutei Moharan, number 3, I'm just going to pick out some of the section, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's not very long, but I could read the whole thing, but I'm just going to focus on the part of it that focuses on birds, first of all, and see what he says about birds. All right, and then I'm going to follow that with a thing about Walter Benjamin to show you how we understand the connection between how Marley and David are using birds and how Nachman Breslav is using birds. So I hope you'll see that's interesting. And then we'll go to the actual sessions of David, and we'll see how this process actually happens. If you go back in the videos, you'll see it actually happens before your very eyes, just by watching David go through these moments of this 2 hours of, actually 4 hours, 5 hours. Okay, so here's what Nachman Breslav, how he begins, and he talks about birds. Now, but I'm reading this. This is the way the Breslav Research Institute translates it, but I'm going to give you my own translation in a moment, in a little while, and you'll see that I'm going to emphasize different things. Some the same, but in some ways, philosophically, I'm going to go at it from a different angle. But first of all, it's good to read the Breslav Research Institute version, just to get a quick idea of what the overall story is here. All right, so here's the beginning. Behold, this is Nachman Breslav, okay? Section 3 from Likutei Moharan. Behold, when somebody listens to the singing of a singer who is wicked, it is detrimental to his serving the Creator. But when he listens to a singer who is virtuous and worthy, it helps him, as will be explained. The reason for this is that the voice of song is drawn from the birds. There are the birds. Okay? If it were daytime, we'd probably hear the birds here in my little garret apartment, but it's nighttime. So instead of hearing birds, we see our kids outside maybe. Okay, as we find in the Midrash, Nachman goes on, as we find in the Midrash, why is the purification of a leper dependent upon 2 live, pure birds? Now we hear a dog. Let the chatterer come and atone for the chatterer. For he, in other words, this leper, was stricken on account of his voice, which spoke slander, loshen hara in Hebrew. We see then that the virtuous person draws his song from the 2 live, pure birds. Okay, now these, you begin to get a feeling that he's not talking about ordinary birds on the doorstep, because these birds can cure lepers. They're special birds. We see then that, thus it is written in the Zohar, section 353b, part 353b, that these 2 birds nurse from the same place that the prophets nurse. We're going to be dealing with theory of prophecy here. By the way, it's basically the same theory that you'll find in Maimonides' Guide, also a theory of prophecy, very close. So these 2 birds nurse from the same place that the prophets nurse. This is why a singer is called a chazan, from the word chazon, which connotes prophecy. The chazan takes his song from the same place that the prophets nurse. But when a singer is wicked, he takes his song from other birds, from those of the evil forces, the klipa. Klipa, from the Hebrew word liklof, to peel. The peelings, the shell, the empty shell. So again, when the singer is wicked, he takes his song from the other birds, those from the empty shell, the klipa. Thus it is written in the Zohar, section part 1, 217b, that the birds of the klipa, of the empty shell, in other words, nurse from the breasts of malchut, kingship. Now malchut means kingdom in Hebrew. Okay? From the breasts of malchut, it becomes kind of a person or something. When midnight comes, a cry goes out. As birds are caught in a trap, so are the children of man ensnared. Again, birds. This time the birds are caught in the trap. So he's talking about the evil birds that are caught in the trap. So are the children of men ensnared. In other words, when people give in to their evil impulses, they become snared, trapped, like the birds do. And if the singer is wicked, then when a person hears him and is attracted by his singing, he too becomes trapped in that evil snare, as is written in the Zohar. so are the children of man ensnared. Now I'm going to jump a little bit, because I don't want to do the whole thing here. I'm just going to, a couple of short sections more, and we'll be through with the Likutei Moharan number 3. Now it is brought in the writings of the Ari, Isaac Luria, of blessed memory, that the birds of the Klippa are the intellect of Malchut the Klippa, the kingdom of the other side. So these evil birds of the shell are the birds of the other side, the side of evil. Whereas those two pure live birds, these two live pure birds, are the concept of building up Malchut the Kedusha, the kingdom of holiness. So either we tear down the kingdom, tear down the kingdom of holiness, or we elevate it. David, now that's interesting, he's talking about King David, but we're going to see that's very close to our David also. David was therefore lauded before Shaul, King Shaul, as one who is skilled at playing music. Now music, again, these words music and singing, you're going to see that I'm going to give you a different translation of these words, of the root word we just nigina, that I think opens up a lot more depth here. This is because the song is a concept of building up Malchut. The song builds up, so helps elevate the kingdom, the kingdom of life, you might say, everyday life, to a higher level of life. Which is why David was deserving of Malchut, kingship. So David had the ability to elevate the kingdom of life from everyday life to a higher life. Now, as a matter of fact, our little David, David Schwartz, did the same thing, but not on the level that King David does. But still, one of my main points I'm going to be making here is that the exercise that David did at the end of the 5 hours of work, where he took these different forms that he discovered in the therapy work and made a little theater piece and improv out of them, was a good example of what I'm talking about, if we understand it here in the right proper perspective. And that's my job, is to fill in the perspective here. I know it's not clear right now, but I'm maintaining that this process that we did with David Schwartz, more in some ways, opened up the door of prophecy according to the deeper understanding of the theories, because of the Gestalt therapy process of working in the now. Working in the now is the key to setting the river flowing and helping a person to elevate himself. Actually, it's not something one does, something that happens to one by simply surrendering to the process of working in the here and now with a certain humility that David did certainly show us in the work. The last section here from the Likutei Moharan is, but in the future, when Malchut of holiness ascends and God will be king over the entire earth, then song will be uplifted and perfected in the aspect of the intellect of Malchut of holiness, from which song is drawn. So song, what they're calling song here, and I'm going to say use a different word here. When it's perfected, then the prophet, or whoever the person that's undergoing the process is in some way like God being king over the world, and song will be uplifted and perfected in the aspect of the intellect of Malchut of holiness, from which song is drawn. This is the meaning of, for the Lord is king over all the earth, Zamru Maskil, which means sing, enlightened one, sing, intelligent one. Okay, so again, at the end, I'm going to maintain here that in the process of working on taking all the different forms that he discovered in his therapy work, and which first began as, you might say, symptoms or games or manipulative patterns from childhood that a person learns, frozen bits of behavior. But when he was able to take these elements and play with them as an artist, as a performer, using different kinds of music and different kinds of rhythms, and enjoying and playing with them, having fun creatively, then, in a sense, he was somehow elevated himself and was no longer stuck in those behavior patterns, but able actually to to somehow master them, be on top of them. And they use the phrase they use in the theater world is a performer is on top of his material. This is a key jargon word for the Brechtian theater tradition. In a Stanislavski, the naturalistic theater tradition, we think of a performer as immersed, identifying totally, living the role. Whereas in Brechtian theater, we want the performer to be have a critical attitude towards the forms. He has a certain collection of forms, they call it a junk collage of forms that he has prepared, and he works in the here and now, getting ideas, they call hits, and then being able to somehow play with the forms and change them from being dead habits, with discards, you might say, from your therapy work, for layers that you peeled away, to elevate them so that they are now serving the here and now process of getting ideas in the now, and then we talk about the messianic now. So a person that's working in the messianic now, somehow or other, like God, on the one hand, totally involved in the world, but on the other hand, on top of the world. As they say in religious people say, riding the Aravot. The Aravot is the desert, riding the desert of our barren existence and all our dead habits, but somehow to be totally identifying with the habits because he just did them in his therapy work. He knows they're him. He's not playing some shtick that some director told him to play or I got some clever idea. He discovered these things in the here and now doing his work, and now he's on top of them at the end of the session here, playing with them as a performer. So there, I believe in the 5 hours, I showed the basic idea of how the process that I've been trying to doing for 35 years and trying to encourage people to do. That is, that performance should start from something real in their life, discovering their own forms, their own ideas, their own oppositions, their own conflicts, and then finding a way through outgrowing them, like a snake sheds his skin, like the klipat is shedding the skills, peeling the onion, to get to something more truthful, some broader ideas, and then to be able to work from that level of higher ideas. This is right out of Plato, the idea of correspondence between the microcosm, this world, and the macrocosm of pure ideas in the mind of God, or some kind of idea of pure ideas. You find this all over the Platonic tradition of philosophy. Just to make it clear, this is the opposite, in a sense, although it's basically part of the same tradition of dialectical thinking, where Aristotle's tradition is that the world is one big organism, with all the parts related like a body, like this is one big organism here, and the strongest force, the mind here, happens to control the body most of the time, and it's one big organism, and the same way the world is one big organism, and God is almost like the mind of the organism. He knows it's his organism, and he's controlling it from outside and inside at the same time. So that's the Aristotle's picture. But Plato's idea is that, and oh, by the way, in Aristotle's tradition, a person is encouraged to be very rational and use his mind to try to discover all the different links and all the different connections, so that he can integrate his life and to a level of a high level of oneness and integration. Whereas in nachman of Breslav, it's the opposite. It's still dialectical thinking, but from an opposite point of view, because he sees that in Plato tradition there's a gap. There's man's mind cannot just go from this world, what Nachman Breslav calls the Malchut of evil, this world, to the higher world, Malchut, the holy kingdom, just by thinking your way. You got to take a leap of faith, which is what David talked about, which locates David very much in the Platonic and Nachman Breslav tradition. It takes a leap of faith to make that transition. Okay, so that's the general framework here. Now let's see how much time I got left here. I got about 20 minutes. I'd rather not stop the tape, even though it's a little clumsy here. All right, now let's tie that in with the Walter Benjamin. Again, what I'm doing mostly in this first hour, I see it's more and more looking like it, is the first hour is more or less a general introduction of David, first of all, who was he, and now the theoretical context. So let's just take this one word, birds. The word birds. You notice that the same word birds in Marley's song, the three birds, and the way David used the birds on the doorstep there, has now taken on a different meaning, birds. You can even think of Nachman of Breslav as being a translator. You know, he started off with David's writings, and he somehow translated them to a different level of understanding of what birds mean. So the name of, I forgot exactly the name of Benjamin's essay, but it's about translation. Let's see, what is the name of the essay? The role of the translator, and he's talking about translating poetry, I think, some French poetry, I think, that he was translating. But I just took a couple of paragraphs from his essay about that, and I'm showing how, I want to show how that ties in with this process here. Okay, so let's just take the word birds, and let's say Walter Benjamin is doing a translation. Here's what Benjamin says. So we want to say the original bird idea is from Marley and David Schwartz, and Nachman of Breslav has a translation of that to a different level. So what Walter Benjamin would say is, the life of the original attains in the translation to its ever-renewed, latest, and most abundant flowering. Now right here we see that Walter Benjamin is not an easy guy to read. It's hard stuff, but I think if we just take a small dose of it here, and I kind of translate Benjamin, excuse me, into less complicated English, then we'll get the point here. Again, the life of the original attains or achieves in the translation to its ever-renewed, latest, and most abundant flowering. Okay? Some kind of an organic idea. Being a special and high form of life, this flowering is governed by a special high purposiveness. Purposiveness. Okay. Now, there we have the idea of microcosm and macrocosm. We're taking the birds on the lower level, but Benjamin is saying that a real translator will somehow get to the real heart of the word of birds, and using that, not the everyday context of the way birds are used, everybody, birds and the bees, that kind of bird, but somehow the birds that Nachman of Breslav is talking about is an example of moving the word birds up to the microcosm level, the idea of ideas and the mind of God, that high level. Or if you don't believe in God, so just Leibniz would call it, I think, pure ideas. There's all kinds of philosophers talk about pure ideas and not pure ideas, unclear ideas. You find that in Luzzatto also, the idea of aspecularia, the murky ideas and clear ideas. It's all over the place. The relationship between life and purposefulness, in other words, the relationship between Malchut of the kingdom of everyday life and the kingdom of holiness, is seemingly obvious, yet almost beyond the grasp of the intellect. Yeah, because we're talking about shifting over from one kind of intellect to the other. We're talking about shifting over from deduction, everyday thinking, 2 + 2 = 4 thinking, to induction, which is the kind of thinking that goes on in Gestalt Therapy awareness work. I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that, and gradually the Gestalts come together. So that's an ascent towards integration, whereas deductive logic is a descent from the one idea, breaking it down into a million little details. So again, the relationship between life and purposefulness, seemingly obvious, yet almost beyond the grasp of the intellect. Right, because it's beyond the grasp of everyday deduction, but it requires this other kind of meditative process, here and now thinking. And reveals itself only if the ultimate purpose toward which all single functions tend is sought not in its own sphere, but in a higher one. Okay, there's we talk about two spheres. There's the sphere of the microcosm, everyday life, and the higher one. It almost sounds like Aristotle here, but there's more of a feeling of an other world, that there's not part of one world that we're going to see in Benjamin. He's definitely in the Platonic tradition rather than so much in the Aristotelian tradition, although it might not become clear from this little excerpt here. Okay, I'll go on. Here it can be demonstrated that no translation would be possible if in its ultimate essence it strove for the likeness to the original. So we're not looking for a translation of birds. That's going to be very much like what David and Marley are talking about. Nachman and Breslav has a totally different idea of birds. For in its afterlife, which could not be called that if it were not a transformation and renewal of something living, the original undergoes a change. So we could think of the Nachman Breslav idea of birds as some kind of a death and rebirth of the simple idea of birds on a higher level, because it's gone through a death and rebirth. It's like that's the gap there. This life ends, the next life begins, and there's no gap, no logical life relationship between the two. And that's the afterlife. It's the next level up, the next circle of the spiraling dialectic. If you see my other essays, you know what I'm talking about. A renewal of something living. The original undergoes a change, okay? It's a death and rebirth. Even words which fish meaning can undergo a maturing process. So here we're talking about the maturing of language. Language matures. It's like a snake that sheds its skin. And this ties in, by the way, with Gestalt Therapy a lot, you find that talk about maturation, maturing. For example, maturing is going from support of the environment to self-support. And we see that in the beginning of that in David. Right now he's very much dependent upon Marley, and now it's the Rebbe at the Har Zion, Diaspora Yeshiva. He's very much bonds himself to a certain pattern of ideas, a certain idea of truth, rather than so much getting involved in the here and now process of discovering for himself. David has a tendency to swallow what we call introjects, pure guru figures, and you swallow the person whole, and then you move on to the next guru. Right now, our Marley's out, and Mordechai Goldstein's in, and who knows what he'll be in next week. But that's still not David himself discovering his own world, his own life. So we see beginning of that in David's work. Going on with Benjamin, is a translation which catches fire on the internal life of the works and a perpetual renewal of language. Again, we're showing how language is renewed by a person like Nachman of Breslav. Translation keeps putting the hallowed growth of languages to the test. How far removed is their hidden meaning from revelation? How close can it be brought by the knowledge of this remoteness? So, how close is Marley's idea of birds to Nachman of Breslav's idea of birds? And how close is Nachman of Breslav's idea of birds to the ultimate idea of truth that a person can get from the Kabbalah or from the life experiences? So I think most of us would agree that if you really understand Nachman of Breslav, that you find a much deeper idea of what birds mean there. So it's closer, the meaning of the way Nachman uses the word birds is closer to revelation than the way, although Marley and David might be hinting at that, but Nachman has a way of saying it, if you understand it, of course, in a much deeper way. Okay? Last idea here, and this also ties in with something that David says. Unlike, we didn't hear it yet from David, but in the dream work, in the Gestalt Therapy work he did, he comes at the end of the session, the end of the 2 hours, he talks about a daydream where he sees himself trapped. And he hears a honking outside the door, the window. And he's imagining that somebody's out there calling him to come. And at the same time, he's held back because he can't find the key. That's a very powerful Gnostic image, if you're into Gnosticism, about the matrix, you know, controlling us and our souls being trapped in the world and all that. So here's what Walter Benjamin says about that idea. You know, Walter Benjamin was very much connected to Gershom Scholem, and Gershom Scholem was very much advocating Gnosticism as one of the major sources of Kabbalah, so you can see where this is coming from. Now Benjamin says, unlike a work of literature, translation does not find itself in the center of the language forest, but on the outside, facing the wooden ridge. It calls into it without entering. Now there's a Gnostic idea of something that calls in, but this time instead of God in heaven or a person's true soul calling in to some trapped person here, or to the trapped birds, or to the person, it's the translation. In other words, it's as though Nachman of Breslav's idea of birds is calling into Marley and David's idea of birds and saying, "Hey birds, look, I got a true message out here. Come get the word." And then David's idea of birds and Marley's idea of birds are stuck on a level of they're searching for spirituality in some kind of an abstract way. They get truth out there somehow, and maybe if I take enough drugs, I'll get to it. But or if I scream loud enough with my rock music or something, or if I get into a big enough crowd of people, I'll get to that. But Nachman of Breslav is pointing the way, and I hope it becomes clear in this work, that you don't need the crowd, you don't need the drugs, you don't need the, you just need the here and now, you need the truth search. At least that's the way I do. Now, of course, most Breslavers don't do that. Most Breslavers follow the guru, and they're like a herd of lemmings running off the cliff, you know. And that's the danger, the fascist aspect of any of these Hasidic cults. But I'm looking at Nachman of Breslav in a much more deeper way, and I'm going to get to that in the next tape. Looks like this one's almost done. So I'll just finish off here, this little bit about Benjamin, and one more sentence here. Again, so unlike a work of literature, translation does not find itself in the center of the language forest, but on the outside facing the wooden ridge. So here they have this higher idea of birds calling into the lower idea of birds. It calls into it without entering, aiming at the single spot where the echo is able to give, in its own language, the reverberation of the work in the alien one. Now that's a difficult sentence. It took me a while to figure that out. Let me just translate that into English if I can. So we have this image of the true idea of birds calling into the simple idea. And it's the true idea of birds is calling into that spot where somehow in the everyday idea of birds that David and that Marley are using here, there's something in that resonates with the deeper meaning, but David and Marley don't know how to get to it because they haven't they don't have the path that Walter Benjamin and Nachman of Breslav have developed. They don't have the tools. They're groping around with their tools that they have, and millions of people follow them. And as long as they don't lead them, they don't get lost. As long as Marley doesn't lead too many people the wrong direction, then it'll do a lot of good. But of course, there's a danger unless you're grounded enough in deeper ideas and technology of meditation, all that stuff, like Nachman of Breslav obviously is, that appealing to the inner idea of what a bird is not enough. That there's got to be some kind of I forgot what it was. The technology of the sacred. Who used that phrase? I read it a long time ago. But anyway, there's got to be some kind of a technology of the sacred that works better than drugs or loud music or a mob scene or following the guru or any of that stuff. That's what I want to try to point out as we go on now in the second half here. So again, his sentence that the translation, in other words, the deeper meaning of the word birds, is calling in without entering. It aims at that spot where the echo, in other words, the echo of the true meaning in the simple meaning of birds is able to give, in its own language, the reverberation of the work in the alien one. The reverberation of the work in the alien one. So this is a Gnostic idea that David's idea of birds and Marley's idea of birds is in a sense a meaning which has been captured by the archons, the Gnostic archons, and trapped in all kinds of cultural overlays so that the deeper process of healing that could happen doesn't happen. Now, I'm not an expert on Marley's life, so maybe he did find that in his Rastafarian, I think it was, tradition. So I'm not criticizing Marley at all, and I'm not criticizing David, because David is a true pilgrim. He's looking for that. You know, up to now he just hasn't found the right tools, but he's certainly on the path. So I'm not criticizing either Marley or David. I'm just pointing out that people who settle for this mass culture or drug scene or the simple Uncle Remus idea of birds on my shoulder, and you know, it's okay for a life, you know, and a lot of people live that way. But somebody said the unexamined life is not worth living. So if you have a mind to use and you want to use it, then I hope that what I'm going to tell you in the next tape will give you some ideas how to use it a little better. Although you might, you know, have a better way, then that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. But again, the last sentence is, so this translation calls in without entering, aiming at the single spot. The spot, that deeper search. In other words, the moment of tzimtzum in the Kabbalah, where a person is torn between opposites, goes inside and finds the pure idea, the rhythm of contact withdrawal, where you close your eyes, go into the void, and find the new idea that is able to encompass and move you up to the next level. So that is what the translation, the higher meaning of birds, is calling to here, and hoping that that deep meaning reverberate, will somehow resonate even in the simple idea, the alienated, the idea that's captured by the archons of the simple meaning of birds, and somehow provide the person that's doing the search with a way to get to the motivation to begin to find its way out of that maze. Okay, and I'm not sure exactly where this tape is going to end, so maybe I'll stop now. The next step will be to look at Likutei Moharan number 3, taking it word by word, not all the words, but some of the key words, especially the word bird and the word frog, which are important, and showing specifically where I'm getting this from. So far it sounds like I'm coming across with some kind of wisdom here that I made up, but I want to show you this, how I found this right in the text of Nachman of Breslav. And of course, most people that study Nachman of Breslav don't know and don't want to know about what I'm going to say, because they don't want to, it's too complicated, first of all, and Rebbe Nachman they always say, Nachman says, oh, don't study philosophy, you know, pray, study, pray. Pray twice, study once, and that's it, you know, don't use your brain too much. Just follow the herd, follow the Rebbe, all that. Go to Uman and, you know, do that. Well, I'm saying doing that ain't enough, okay? That isn't even what Nachman of Breslav wants. If you take the trouble to decode his very careful poetry that he wrote in the spirit of 19th century Romanticism. But if you don't want to hear about that, don't do me any favors. Bye-bye, you know. But if you do want to hear about it, I hope you'll listen to the next tape. Okay, in the meantime, I'll stop right here. All right, I guess that's it. Okay.